Hey, this is Heidi Dawson. If you love all things health and wellness and style of any kind, hang out here with me each week. I'm obsessed with never-ending improvement, and it's all in an effort to help each one of us live a wildly successful lifestyle. Subscribe today so you don't miss a thing. Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 291 of the Wildly Successful Lifestyle Podcast. Welcome to everyone listening, whether you're new or whether you're an old friend. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I love you guys, and I really do appreciate you. And don't forget to leave a 5-star review if you're loving the episodes. It really does help. It helps me personally with reaching more people. All right, so how often do you feel confident, certain, and decisive? I gave that a lot of thought as I was kind of thinking about this episode, and confidence comes easy for me. I think the reason why is that I looked up the definition of confidence, and it's a belief or conviction that an outcome will be favorable. And I'm a natural optimist, so I generally believe that everything's going to work out great. I'm also pretty decisive, mainly in my work arena, so in my interior design, with my podcasting and coaching. I can make a decision quickly, and I generally don't question it once I make it. Now, I can be decisive about what or where I want to eat. That is one area that I need to clean up. And certainty is the one, though, that I wasn't really sure about for me. There are some things I'm certain about, but they mainly have to do with my personal life, so involving Eric or Molly or my friends. I got a lot of certainty there. But having confidence and feeling certain and being decisive, these are valuable traits, and they're learnable. That's the great thing. In fact, there are ways, even just in the way we carry ourselves, that add to whether we feel confident or not. So how about you? How often do you feel confident, certain, and decisive? If you don't feel confidence very often, could it be that your mind is telling you things aren't going to end well, so it holds you back from trying new things? Here's the thing. We're creatures of habit. Whatever we do regularly, it becomes our habit. So if you're consistently holding yourself back, that becomes a habit. If you consistently have a hard time making decisions, that also becomes a habit. It's a sort of a way of life. That's just how you are, right? How many times have you heard someone describe another person as they couldn't make a decision to save their life? I mean, we can simply fall into the habit of that, but we can also learn how to get better at it, being confident and being certain and decisive. If you don't feel confident or certain, or you have trouble making decisions, you may constantly seek other people's opinions or look to someone else for advice because you're not in touch with what you really want, or you're afraid to admit what you really want because it probably won't happen anyway. And you can't be certain about anything because there's no plan, there's no scheduling your week. Life is just sort of happening as it comes, so you aren't really making decisions. They're sort of made for you by life just happening. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. But you see, when I say each of those words, confidence, certainty, and decisiveness, they generate inside of me an inspiration to want to feel them more. Because when you feel them and when you feel confident and you're able to make decisions and you're certain that no matter what happens in life, you aren't going to quit, that's a winning formula for success, because you can't lose when you're certain you'll never quit. And you weren't afraid to make decisions when you know that even if it wasn't the right one, you learned something and you're one step closer to the right one, which gives you the confidence to try again. So how can we be more confident? Confidence doesn't mean always succeeding, and confidence is really built through knowing that whether you succeed at something or not, you'll pick yourself up and keep trying. One of the biggest things Tony Robbins attributes to confidence is something we easily control. It's called our physiology, and that's basically how we carry ourselves. In a TED Talks, Amy Cuddy says that spending 2 minutes in a power pose will boost your confidence by a huge margin. They actually studied this. Power poses would be like a Wonder Woman stance. You can Google that if you don't know what it is. But I suggest you listen to her TED Talk. It's so good. And I think it's about 13 minutes. But I will preface this, though. She's got a lot of unusually strong criticism for her studies on power posing, but her science is solid. And you can read the thoughts on why it was criticized. My thoughts are, anytime women are empowering women, it's a really good thing. And that's what she's doing with this. But I did this recently. And I have to say, it definitely helped me tap into an inner strength. Now, I suggest using this before you go into situations where you might be nervous. Like, I put myself in a power posture for 2 minutes. That's it. Maybe could you use this before your next interview? Maybe you do a power pose before your next family get together. It's a really powerful way to create more confidence. And it's something that you have control of, which is great. Okay, so how can we be more decisive? Sometimes we're indecisive because we get overwhelmed with the big picture. The best way to become more decisive, in my opinion, is just to take the next logical step. My older sister lost her husband this last week, who basically he took care of everything. I mean, it would be very easy to get overwhelmed with not knowing all that she needed to do. But she doesn't have to overwhelm herself. Sometimes it's just putting one foot in front of the other to get out of bed for that day. Don't worry about the 10 steps down the road. What's the next best step you can take today? And when you make a decision, commit to it. Get behind it. No one's certain all the time. If your decision turns out to be the wrong one, okay, learn from it and pivot. That's the key to becoming more decisive, knowing that if it's not the right one, you learn and you pivot. And sometimes people have trouble making decisions because they focus on only what could go wrong. But what about what could go right? Don't always only consider the negative. Also visualize what could be right about it. We paralyze ourselves sometimes by focusing just on what the negative aspects of it could be. And finally, realizing that there may not be a perfect decision. It makes it easier to just choose one. It could just be opening a door you didn't realize needed to be opened. And finally, how can we be more certain? A lot of times we are uncertain because we don't have a plan, or we're going into a scenario where we aren't certain what's going to happen or how someone's going to react. There is one thing you can always be certain of, and that's how you show up, what you do, how you act. Visualize how you want to show up in any scenario that might come up. Who do you want to be? This past week, we were hit with that family tragedy of my brother-in-law tragically dying, and I didn't know how things were going to go, but I knew how I was going to show up. Eric and I actually had an 1.5-hour drive to get to my family, and during that drive we talked about it. We talked about how we wanted to show up when we got there. I knew my older sister was going through the hardest thing she ever has, and she needed to be there to just listen and love and support her in whatever way she needed, and that's what I did. I knew I also was going to be seeing my other sister that I haven't seen in years, and I didn't know how that was going to be. But I decided I was just going to love and be who I always have been, and that's someone who doesn't hold resentment, who doesn't hold a grudge, and that's how I showed up. And you know what? There was not 1 minute of awkwardness. I mean, if there was, I didn't notice it. Now, I made up my mind in advance, so I created certainty for myself in how I was going to be. It felt really good to be certain of how I was going to be, even though the situation was uncertain. Sometimes that is all the certainty you need, being certain of how you're going to show up regardless, and you have control of that too. My challenge to you this week is to Google the power poses and pick one and do it for 2 minutes and see how it makes you feel. And then practice making decisions with small things like where to eat lunch. Just pick one and line up with it. The more decisive you are, the more decisive you'll be. And finally, you can find certainty every day in knowing how you're going to show up. And that is something that is definitely within your control. I love you guys. I'll talk to you in a few days. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends, because we're just going to keep going bigger and better places together, and I love that about us. Talk to you in a few days.